Grandma Susan and my brother Mark wouldn't come to my wedding if he couldn't propose to his girlfriend Emily during the ceremony. Honestly, it was the best wedding gift those losers could have given me. I'm making this a full post here because I can't update the original subreddit where all of this started, so I'll compile everything here. I'm 27 years old, and I'll begin by saying that my wedding is scheduled for April. My 25-year-old fiancée, Sarah, has always dreamed of a spring wedding, and I love the idea too. However, I have an older brother, Mark, who is 30. Last Saturday, I was called to my parents' house to discuss something important. They refused to tell me what it was about until I arrived. Once I got there, they sat me down with Mark and told me he wanted to use my wedding as the perfect day to propose to Emily. I immediately got angry and told them, absolutely not. But they all ganged up on me. I ended up so furious that I, a single man, somehow cornered all three of them. My response was that if they insisted on this, not only would all three of them be uninvited, but I would also cut off the financial support I've been giving them monthly. This support started after they paid for Mark's college, the golden child, by taking out a second mortgage. I got a pretty well-paying job, and I've been sending my parents $500 a month to help ease their mortgage burden. I didn't even ask for a share of their house's property because I don't actually want it. It was purely an act of goodwill, but as an act of goodwill, I can cut it off whenever I want. I left without saying anything else to them. The next day, Mark came to my house yelling that I had ruined his big opportunity. He claimed our parents were now taking my side, saying they would kick him out if he tried to propose at my wedding. He accused me of financially blackmailing our parents and insisted he only wanted a good opportunity to propose because he was afraid Emily would leave him soon. I told him that was his problem, not mine, because my wedding day was not about him. I warned him that if he tried to propose at my wedding, I would have him removed. That wasn't a maybe, it was a definite. I doubted his girlfriend would appreciate her proposal ending with a guard kicking her out like a bouncer at a club. Mark yelled a few more things at me, then went crying to our only surviving grandparent, our maternal grandmother, Susan. She called to scold me on the phone. Unsurprisingly, Mark had heavily altered the story he told her. Even after I told her the real story, she still sided with him. She tried to stand firm, but the verbal onslaught I unleashed ended up leaving her in tears. This got back to my parents, who were angry with me for taking it so far. However, I told them I only went that far because I had to, especially when all three of them were trying to convince me to let Mark use my wedding as a springboard for a proposal. In the end, they agreed with me, but still thought I was a bit rude. Mark showed up at my house again, screaming that I was a jerk and that he hoped I was happy for not allowing him the opportunity. My fiancée, Sarah, knows what Mark tried to do and is absolutely furious. She's almost ready to uninvite them and cut ties if this continues. Normally, I have a very calm temperament, but when it comes to certain people like Mark, my parents, and especially Grandma Susan, I can easily become sharp-tongued due to all the past favoritism. Grandma Susan always sided with Mark and believed his lies, no matter what he did. She is the biggest reason my parents favored Mark as well. Grandma Susan kept trying to convince me over the phone to let Mark propose at my wedding, and I finally lost my patience with her. I ended up talking to Mark again and threatened to tell Emily if he still planned to propose at my wedding without permission. He took it very badly and called me a horrible person, so I pointed out that my wedding wasn't about him. Our parents were present for this and backed me up. I think Mark was stunned when they did. My dad pointed out that he had raised Mark wrong and that it was his fault. So, from now on, Mark needed to truly show them respect. They wanted to draw up an official lease agreement for him to pay rent and utilities properly. He had only been paying them $300 a month without contributing to any utilities or food, despite having a good salary. If he didn't want to pay, he could leave, and they would rent his room to someone else. Mark turned to Mom for help, but she just agreed with Dad. He looked like he was about to explode, then stormed out of the house. He returned a couple of hours later, but didn't speak to anyone and locked himself in his room. 2 days later, Mark announced he was moving in with Grandma Susan because she invited him. Our parents basically told him if he wanted to live with her, go ahead. Mark responded by saying everyone hated him for just wanting to propose to Emily. My parents pointed out it wasn't that he wanted to propose, but where he wanted to do it, and he wouldn't get any support for that. He now refuses to speak to our parents. Grandma Susan tried calling me again, but I ended up telling her Mark wouldn't be able to propose at my wedding, so she could get over it or not come, and the same went for her. I ended up throwing her favoritism towards Mark, ever since we were children, back in her face. She tried to deny it at first, but couldn't maintain it with everything I pointed out. She ended up crying again as I told her that if she kept insisting on this, then she wouldn't be coming to my wedding. She pleaded with me not to uninvite her, but still said she didn't understand why I couldn't let Mark have his way before hanging up. My fiancée Sarah is 100% on my side and is completely ready to remove Mark and Grandma Susan from the wedding. Grandma Susan hasn't called back, nor is she speaking to my parents. My guess is Mark went to cry to her again, telling her that Mom and Dad weren't enabling him anymore, so she offered for him to move in with her. But there's literally nothing she can do to convince me, and I think my last conversation with her made her realize that. I didn't want to tell Mark's girlfriend Emily, but she called me one Saturday because of my Reddit post. She saw it narrated in an online video and then realized it might be me because of how I described Mark and Grandma Susan. So yes, now Emily knows. She ended up tearing Mark apart. He still tried to justify himself to her. That's when she told him they were over and cut off all contact with him. Mark, of course, blamed me, even though Emily said she had been ready to leave him for a while, and if he had tried to propose no matter where, she would have said no. So that's that. Mark showed up at my house one more time to throw a tantrum, saying he would boycott my wedding. He seriously thought he had the upper hand because he and Grandma Susan weren't coming. I told him I wouldn't miss him, that he's in his 30s and needs to grow up. Our parents cut the umbilical cord and are no longer supporting him. They are already painting his room to rent it out to someone, and they also plan to rent my old room because they need the money after the financial hole he put them in. He dropped out of college, lived off them for a while, then got an online degree later, barely paying rent while also having them pay for his food and utilities, despite having a good salary. They spent the world on him, and he wasn't even a little grateful. That made Mark just shut down and leave. We haven't heard a peep from him since. That's everything that's happened from my original post until now. Edit. Yes, I have very good security hired for the wedding, and they will remove my brother like a bar bouncer in a blink of an eye. Update 1. Well, Mark and Grandma Susan are officially uninvited for my upcoming wedding. Grandma Susan called me again to scold me even more for refusing to let Mark propose. Apparently, he's devastated with grief over his ex. Yes, so devastated that he's already on Tinder looking for a date, or at least that's what his social media says. I pointed that out to Grandma Susan, but she thinks it's his way of coping. I told her I didn't care. He's no longer invited to my wedding because I can't trust him not to do something crazy if he's there. Then she dropped her classic line, "I don't understand why." That's what she always says when I don't do something for Mark after he bothers me. For example, I once lent Mark money when he was still in online college. He didn't want to pay it back despite promising to. Even after getting a good job, he stalled and made excuses when I asked him to pay me. He had the money. He just didn't want to let go of it. So I said I would never lend him money again. And Grandma Susan dropped her phrase that she doesn't understand why, even when I told her it was because I knew Mark would never want to pay me back, so I wasn't going to give him another cent. Her response was to still say she didn't understand. So hearing her say that about Mark being banned from my wedding made me explode. I yelled at her that she does understand, she just pretends not to because she doesn't want to. She has always sided with Mark, no matter what he did, and that's why she's not invited to my wedding either. I don't care if she cries because I'm fed up with her. She made her bed with the side she chose, now she can lie in it. Of course, she burst into tears, wailing like a sad whale and calling me a bad grandson. I told her she was a bad grandmother for thinking I was the bad grandson when she always believed Mark's lies and showed favoritism. Everyone else knew it too. I'm tired of her pretending everything was rosy when she used to hit me, and then tell me I'd be a bad child if I told my parents she spanked me. I then told her not to call me again unless it was to admit the truth and give me a genuine apology. After that, I hung up, and there was complete silence from her. I also preemptively told my parents what happened. Their response was that they no longer cared that I yelled at her, because she would never stop siding with Mark no matter what. My parents, in fact, are doing much better since Mark left. They have 2 rooms ready to rent out and on the market waiting for tenants. Dad is also working on clearing out the attic to make another room up there and rent it out. They are basically converting as many rooms as they can in their house into living space. They will need that rental money to help pay off their debts and are still very grateful to me for helping them with the money I've been sending monthly. My parents sat me down a while ago and profusely apologized for everything that happened from my childhood until now. They said they couldn't give any good excuse for why Mark was the favorite when they shouldn't have had favorites at all. and that what they did was completely unacceptable. The fact that I was still willing to help them, even after everything they had done, made them realize how horrible they had been as parents. From now on, they would do their best to be better people. They also basically stopped caring what Mark and Grandma Susan thought. They haven't been speaking to them either. I haven't heard anything from Mark's ex, Emily. She wants nothing to do with my family, and I don't blame her. My fiancée, Sarah, is super happy that I stood my ground because she wanted Mark and Grandma Susan out much earlier. Then she admitted something to me that I didn't know. Apparently, the few times she was alone with Grandma Susan, the grandma told her all sorts of lies about me that Sarah never once believed. She didn't remember much, but basically, Grandma Susan said a bunch of things that I remember Mark doing, and blamed me for them. The gist was that Grandma Susan was trying to tell Sarah I was a bad seed as a child, and that she'd better keep a close eye on me in case I decided not to marry her. So yes, Grandma Susan was trying to poison the well with more lies. One story Sarah remembered Grandma Susan telling was one I immediately recognized: the broken lamp story. Grandma Susan had a beautiful handmade stained glass lamp. Mark threw a football inside the house, aiming straight for it, and the lamp fell and shattered. It was old and fragile, like Grandma Susan, so it basically just disintegrated. Mark said I was throwing a ball inside the house and he tried to stop me, but it was actually the other way around. Grandma Susan refused to believe me and spanked me with a wooden spoon with my pants down. My grandfather, Grandpa George, knew Mark was lying and even told my parents. Mark was punished, and I was told I didn't have to visit Grandma Susan if I didn't want to. After Grandpa George passed away, I stopped going. The fact that that old witch kept talking about those things to people like Sarah when I wasn't around enrages me. So I'm more than happy to have cut the tumors that are my brother and Grandma Susan out of my life. I don't need them anymore. Update 2. Well, a few days ago, Mark knocked on my door again, and this time he was drunk. Drunk, he told me he found out about my Reddit posts because he tried to get back with his ex, Emily, and she told him how she discovered what he was planning. So his stupid ass thought it would be a good idea to get drunk and then confront me. He even vomited on my porch step. Then he did something I didn't see coming. He curled up on the ground, crying. I thought he was going to attack me or something because he was acting so unhinged, but instead he got into a fetal position and cried on the grass. He blamed me for his problems between swigs from the bottle he carried. From what I could gather, he had recently gone to see his ex, Emily, and begged her to get back with him. She told him he was a big baby and that she would never want to marry him. Then she explained how she knew he planned to propose. He went home and searched online until he found my Reddit posts and read them. He scrolled through many comments on my previous posts, and when he realized almost no one saw things from his point of view, he smashed his computer monitor. He started chugging a bottle of vodka while walking to my house, as I live only 3 kilometers from Grandma Susan's house. While sitting on the ground, he drunkenly insulted me, saying it was my fault that everyone but Grandma Susan now hated her. I had no sympathy, and told him he did all of that himself. Yes, I aired our dirty laundry online by telling everything, but he was still the entitled jerk who never truly grew up and ran to cry to Grandma Susan like a spoiled brat when he didn't get what he wanted. It's time to grow up and be a man. He said a few more things I barely understood, and then pretty much stopped talking. He just sat there drinking and crying. I ended up taking what was left of the vodka bottle from him and said that maybe when he was sober he could see some common sense. Then I called a taxi to take him home. I wasn't going to drive him to Grandma Susan's house because I didn't want to see or be near her. Mark didn't even thank me for calling and paying for the taxi. He just slumped into the back seat and told the driver to drive off. The next day, the taxi service called me, saying Mark had vomited several times all over the back seat during the short ride. It cost $200 to thoroughly clean it because it was everywhere. I apologized and asked them to send the bill to Mark. It's been a few days since then, but the crap didn't end there, so I'll make another post very soon. Update 3. I knew it. I knew it, and some of you said it. Grandma Susan couldn't just let it go. She and Mark were already uninvited from my upcoming wedding and almost treated like ghosts by the rest of the family. But now she made a huge fuss about it. She brought Mark to my parents' house to show them my Reddit posts. The thing is, my parents already know about them and have read them because I admitted it after a drunken Mark came to my house yelling at me. My parents no longer care because the situation opened their eyes a long time ago. I wasn't there to see it, but Grandma Susan took it as a tragedy and told my parents that I had completely humiliated her and that she didn't understand why I would do this over something so trivial as Mark proposing at my upcoming wedding. Well, the next part I never expected. My mom, always the passive doormat to her mother my entire life, finally exploded at Grandma Susan, telling her she was a narcissist and that her influence made her and my dad seem like narcissists too, and that they were idiots for allowing it. Then they told Grandma Susan and Mark that wanting to propose at my wedding was a completely stupid and selfish idea. They then reiterated reasons I had already stated, like Mark probably wanting to put Emily on the spot in front of the whole family. Then my parents told both of them to get out. Mark was especially scolded because he had used them like an ATM for years and barely contributed any money after getting a good salary. And then I, the son they regrettably ignored, was someone they were much prouder of because I helped them start to undo the damage they had done to themselves, and so far, I haven't asked for anything in return. They told me Grandma Susan went crazy, and Mark was silent almost the entire time. The next part is from my own experience because Grandma Susan called me again to yell at me. I let her vent while Sarah and I put the phone on the coffee table with the speaker on. After a while, Grandma Susan realized I wasn't saying anything and yelled at me to respond. So I said something one of the commentators here pointed out in a previous post, that she is a coward who thinks she's in charge, but she's not, and never will be. She can't order me around, has nothing to leverage against me, and always acts like she doesn't understand my reasons when I know she does. She just never wants to admit it. Then I confronted her about the lies she told Sarah about me. Grandma Susan immediately denied it, but then Sarah spoke up and said she had told me everything Grandma Susan said to her and asked why she would do that. Did she not want me to get married and be happy? Or what? That's when everything came out. Grandma Susan yelled that she was furious because I was getting married before Mark. She wanted him to get married first because he's older and her favorite grandson. She thought the least I could do was let Mark try to save his relationship by proposing at my wedding. I told her that wasn't trying to save a relationship. That was trying to trap that poor woman into one, hoping she wouldn't say no in front of a crowd. But I had already spoken with Emily, Mark's ex, before she cut off contact with everyone, and I know for a fact that she would have said no anyway. She had been ready to break up for months. I doubt that relationship would have lasted long enough to even make it to my wedding. Then I said I knew she would call me selfish, so I pointed out all the things that make her selfish and not me. I'm helping my parents financially when I didn't have to. I didn't ask anyone for money when I went to college. I worked hard on my relationship with my partner and didn't conspire to find a way to control her. Meanwhile, Grandma Susan prefers to spit out any reason she can think of to make Mark the golden child who does no wrong. She lied about me just to try and ruin my relationship in the hope that Mark would get married first. And she openly admitted that she has a favorite grandson. That is selfishness. Then I said if it had turned out that Mark was in love with Sarah or something, I bet she would have demanded that Sarah be handed over to Mark too, because that's the kind of selfish narcissist she is. Afterward, the only thing I heard on the line was Grandma Susan sobbing loudly and Mark trying to console her. He didn't say anything to me, and then the call was cut off. Whether by him or her, I don't know, but I think it's fair to say that this time I verbally destroyed Grandma Susan, far more than I ever had. And yes, this time I finally blocked her number and Mark's too. Update 4. Well, it's been quite a journey. Quite a few things have happened since my last post, so I thought it best to wait until I was married and settled after the honeymoon to tell everyone. First, I want to say that I don't know a damn thing about taxes, other than that I pay them. But someone here questioned how I could deduct the money I gave my parents monthly for their mortgage. And I honestly thought it was possible. But a person who does do taxes contacted me and said that wasn't possible, or at least it shouldn't be, since I don't have partial ownership of the house. That made me curious if I was breaking the law. Well, I looked into it, and long story short, the person who used to do my taxes no longer does them. I took my questions to the owner of the firm and explained that the guy who handled my taxes was taking a deduction of about a third on the money I paid my parents' mortgage each month. Well, the owner said he would review my records himself and call me back. It took a few days, but he told me the guy who did my taxes did a few things he shouldn't have and already had a previous history of doing that. The firm fired him. The owner apologized profusely and asked me not to take my business elsewhere. I believe in supporting local businesses and buying from them when I can. So I told him that as long as my records were in order, I would stay with them. He assured me he would verify everything was correct. I think it's stupid that the owner didn't fire my old tax preparer after his first offense, and I feel like he covered a lot up. But he assured me that from now on, he would personally do my taxes, so I'll give him the opportunity to fix everything. Since my last post, my parents also managed to rent out their 2 spare rooms. Both tenants are young women renting for the first time, and each took a room. They are both quite nice, but I've barely spoken to them. My parents say they have been good tenants, so we'll see how everything goes. Dad also started remodeling the attic to convert it into another room they can eventually rent out. It's going to be a slow process because he doesn't have much time except on weekends, but he's determined to finish it now. Now for the period leading up to my wedding. Well, Grandma Susan went completely insane. Apparently, after I put her in her place over the phone about a month ago, she lost her mind even more and actually took it out on Mark. I never saw that coming, considering how much she loves and enables him. After about a week, a neighbor heard all the commotion and ended up going to check on her. She attacked him for doing so. The police were called, and Grandma Susan was taken away on a psychiatric hold. She also tried to attack one of the officers, but she's a frail old lady with dentures. She couldn't do much to one of them. My parents went to see her, but visitors weren't allowed until after 3 days. When the 3 days were up, my parents spoke with her and told me she was acting very much like a victim, trying to win my parents back to her side. Mom said Grandma Susan kept blaming me and also saying she still had a right to be at my wedding. Well, Mom let her have it, saying she lost that right after everything she said and did, all the lies and gaslighting. Being angry with me over something as petty as me getting married before her spoiled older grandson, whom she herself said was her favorite, is very low. Meanwhile, Mark was quietly at her house because he had the place all to himself until Grandma Susan was allowed to return. I don't have much information from that point because my parents didn't bother to see Grandma Susan or Mark again until now. Now my wedding. The outdoor venue Sarah and I chose was beautiful. There was a good-sized artificial pond with paddle boats and a lot of wild ducks and frogs. Although the ducks would approach people begging for food, we brought some cheap wheat bread so the kids in the family could throw some to the ducks. The venue was also near a golf course, so the kids had fun looking for lost golf balls like they were Easter eggs. They actually found a lot. It was good, wholesome fun. Yes, I had security there. And yes, Grandma Susan showed up and tried to get in. Even though her invitation had already been officially rescinded, she still had the paper invitation she received in the mail because she refused to return it when she was uninvited. Mark wasn't with her, but she drove 300 kilometers alone just to try and sneak into my wedding. She arrived acting sweet, but then turned into a raging lunatic when the guard denied her entry. She screamed my name and demanded to be let in. She refused to leave until security threatened to call the police. She ended up yelling at the guard and then staggered off to her car. That was the end of that. But this wasn't the end, was it? Because now that the only person still talking to Grandma Susan was Mark, I guess she started taking it out on him. Without any family scapegoats to yell at, she went ballistic on Mark, as he was under her roof. I know this because he sent me a letter since I have him blocked everywhere except postal mail. I received the letter upon returning from the honeymoon. It was a letter with a mix of apologies and blaming me. He said he regretted wanting to propose at my wedding and saw how miserable it would have been to try that. He said I was right about him being slimy for trying to propose to Emily in front of so many people. But then he said he was angry because he couldn't go to my wedding, because I couldn't look past his traumas. Then he said he regretted letting Grandma Susan treat me the way she did for so long, because now he's getting some of it. He then blamed me for upsetting Grandma Susan so much by yelling at her and then not letting her into my wedding. He went on to blame me because our parents kicked him out of their house and for being stuck with Grandma Susan because she's driving him crazy. Clarification: they didn't kick him out. He left when they asked him to pay rent properly, so now he's looking for an apartment. Apparently he did ask my parents to move back in with them, but they refused and told him to get his own place. That's all on that. On a separate note, Mark's ex-girlfriend Emily still hasn't contacted or spoken to anyone in my family since she last spoke to me. I don't blame her. I barely knew her, and we don't have any mutual friends. I checked her social media recently, and she seems to be doing perfectly fine without Mark in her life. So if you're reading this, I'll just say good for you. Live well, and don't let a lunatic like Mark back in. And to Mark, who I know will probably find and read this soon, get a life, man. Stop blaming me for your issues and grow up. You're on your own now, and the rest of us aren't going to enable you anymore. And if you manage to date someone again, don't screw it up like last time. You and I know why it didn't work out with Emily, and I hope you realize that running to Grandma Susan and getting drunk isn't going to help you anymore when you're 30 years old. The world doesn't revolve around you, so let it go. As for me, my honeymoon was great. We took a road trip and made it all the way to the coast. Sarah also insisted that we go bike riding. I'm not much of a cyclist, but it was fun to do a couple of miles along a coastal road. I ended up dead tired, which tells me I need to get in better shape. Anyway, I'd like to thank everyone here for listening to me and offering your advice. It truly helped. Update C. I know the post I made last year was supposed to be the end, but I just wanted to tell this last segment now that everything is truly over. This compiles some events that occurred from then until recently. At first, Mark and Grandma Susan only got worse. Grandma Susan started crying like a whale again when Mark told her he was moving out. Then he had the audacity to ask for my help and our parents' help to move his things because Grandma Susan said she wouldn't let him leave. But our parents just reminded him of all the crap he pulled to end up in his current situation. And instead of acting like a rational human being, he decided to do the exact opposite. He blamed me for ruining his life again. Dad told me he burst out laughing when Mark said that. Then he unleashed a sermon on Mark about how he was blaming me for his own mess. Mark, at 30 years old, curled up in a chair crying. He refused to leave our parents' house that night and stayed curled up on the couch with a bottle of alcohol until the next day. That's when our parents kicked him out with a brutal hangover. Dad told him he needed to genuinely apologize to me, face to face, and that they would no longer consider him their son if he didn't. It took Mark a couple of days, but he showed up at my house with a paper in hand and read an apology he had previously written. He said he was truly sorry for everything he had done, that he had been a piece of crap person and an even worse brother. He searched for every possible way in his head to make me the villain, but the excuses are gone. He can't do it anymore. He can never undo the things he did, but he wants to move forward and try to fix our relationship as brothers. Starting with getting out of Grandma Susan's house, he told me he understands why none of us want to be there, and that he will seek help. We ended up shaking hands and giving each other a hug. So far, he has truly been working hard to improve. He has even drastically cut down on his alcohol consumption. As for Grandma Susan, she tried to prevent Mark from moving out. She refused to let the movers he hired enter, and he had to get help from a police officer to keep her at bay. They only had to get things out of one room, and with the movers and Mark working, they got everything out in record time. Grandma Susan ended up threatening to take her own life as he left, or so Mark said. I'm pretty sure it was true because she did try it, but in the most attention-seeking way possible. She took a bunch of pills and then called 911 herself. She was taken to the hospital and had her stomach pumped. This was a bit redundant because she had already vomited before the ambulance arrived, but they wanted to make sure. Our parents ended up involving protective services because Grandma Susan ended up on another psychiatric hold, only this time in a hospital bed. During her stay, she underwent several tests because she had avoided doctors for years, and they found she was in very poor health. Her kidney function was low, her lungs weren't good at all, and she was at high risk for diabetes. So they had to place Grandma Susan in a care facility for her own health and safety. I wasn't very surprised. She was a short woman but carried some weight, and she had all her teeth pulled when she was in her 50s because all she drank was soda and ate a lot of sweets. She especially loved chocolate. She also used to be a heavy smoker when she was younger, and I guess that caused lasting damage to her lungs. She had been having trouble breathing for a while but somehow hid it from all of us. The doctors found that she needed oxygen and could no longer live alone. She wanted Mark to come back and become her full-time caregiver, but he refused and said he simply couldn't, that he had his own life to live and a lot to repair with the rest of us. Well, Grandma Susan went crazy, crying and throwing things in the hospital, yelling at all of us to get out. After she was discharged from the hospital, my parents worked to place her in an assisted living facility. They moved some of her personal belongings to a room there to try and make her more comfortable, but that didn't do much. She was there for a week and said she was incredibly miserable. She claimed the staff treated her like a child and that she had to wear the oxygen machine all the time. She also said she hated being there because, in her words, the place was full of old people. She hated being reminded that she was also old and preferred to be alone. She was there for almost a month before trying to take her life again. She refused to use this oxygen and said she would hang herself with the tubes. They had to put her under 24-hour observation, which only made her even more miserable. Every time we saw her, she would beg us, even begging me, to get her out of that place. She missed her home. She missed her old life. But she wasn't going anywhere because she was considered a danger to herself. Well, over time, she simply seemed to accept her fate, that she would spend the rest of her life in the residence, and Grandma Susan basically just shut down. She became that bitter old woman who barely spoke to anyone. We would visit her regularly, but she was never happy to see us, especially me. The months blurred into a routine. Things changed a bit when we told her Sarah was pregnant. She perked up then. Sarah, gritting her teeth, let Grandma Susan touch her belly when we visited. That seemed to make her day. If anything, it made Grandma Susan a little kinder to all of us, but generally, she remained her same old, cruel self. Then, a while ago, we found out Grandma Susan had a stroke in her sleep and passed away. The funeral was pretty lackluster. Mom was really the only one who cried. Most of us were just very quiet the whole time. Then we had a small family gathering at my parents' house. But if anyone here thought we'd be singing Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, well, no. It was more a succession of awkward conversations, as many of us had nothing good to say about her. She was already deceased, so what good would it do to talk about how toxic she was in life? There wasn't much to do but stand around and get drunk, and we certainly did. But it was more like a sad, quiet, drunken party, everyone dressed in black and drinking beer or wine. Every time someone tried to do something fun, it would get super awkward until they quieted down or decided to stay silent or leave. Sarah wasn't there because she stayed home after the funeral, as she couldn't drink and didn't want to be around people drinking. Mark is showing genuine improvement. Grandma Susan was his biggest enabler, and she's no longer with us. He sought therapy last year to try and understand himself better and make a real effort to change. For now, he's trying to help Dad with the attic renovation in his spare time, and things are still a bit awkward between us whenever we see each other. Right now, I can't say how things will go in the long term, but without Grandma Susan's toxicity, hopefully, everything will change for the better. As for Grandma Susan's inheritance, well, her will was surprisingly fair. We were all sure Mark would get everything because he was her favorite. But instead, my parents inherited her house. They are working to get it ready to rent out. The rest of Grandma Susan's money and assets were distributed fairly evenly. Well, more or less. I didn't get much, but I didn't want it either. I'm doing fine. I didn't need it. I guess that concludes everything.